Chapter 1, Part 3. Gabby was waiting for us outside on the lawn of the school, spread out and staring at the sky. She sat up as she heard us approach and smiled up at Rayner, who smiled back. It was impossible not to smile when she did. She just had a contagious look about her. He sat next to her on the grass, knees up and elbows resting on them. I reached in the backpack and pulled out the travel mug I had prepared for him, handing it to him. I then pulled out the two I had prepared for myself and Gabby, double-checking the colors to make sure I had given him the correct one. I packed one for myself and thought I'd ask my aunt to bring a second, just in case you decided to join us. I thought you looked lonely and could use something nice. I shrugged as I opened the mug for myself and took a sip. He watched, cautiously lifting it to his lips and taking a sip. He still didn't look entirely comfortable with the idea, but watching Gabby and I drink encouraged him to do so. "Tell me about you, Rayner," Gabby said in a thrilled voice as she looked at him. "You're new around here, aren't you?"
Yeah, my dad lives here, so I thought I'd come spend some time getting to know him a bit better. Go to school, get my diploma somewhere new.
He didn't seem super sure of himself and took another sip to avoid talking further.
What about you two?
Gabby was the first to talk. "I've been here my whole life. My parents never saw a reason to leave. I work with Slade Ryder in his shop. You have to have heard of him. He's kind of huge." "Gabby, he's huge in a certain community, not for everyone," I reminded her. Slade had never wanted fame and had left the military so that he didn't necessarily have a name for himself. That particular plan backfired in the way of his clients following him. His first shop had been in a big city, and he had moved back to his small town home to open his own quaint and quiet shop. He wanted a quiet life, and that was being torn from him every time he tried. In a way, I really felt bad. Gabby had him wrapped around her finger, though, and so did I. He wasn't letting us leave without him, even if that meant giving up the quiet life he wanted. Rayner continued quietly drinking the tea, looking only slightly awkward.
What about you, Karri? Anything interesting?
Me? Nope. I've lived here for a few years, adopted by my aunt. Before that, I was in an accident and I can't remember much. So all my memories are of this place. His eyes snapped up quickly to look at me, trying to figure out what to say.
An accident? You must have been pretty badly injured to forget your past.
I was lucky. I just got a head injury. Well, not lucky, but at least it didn't disfigure me or something. Life must not have been great if I could forget so easily. I shrugged my shoulders and finished my own tea, looking in the distance where there was a convertible. Slade was sitting in it, sunglasses on, as he tried to not look suspicious. His eyes were still on me, but I tried to ignore it.
I'm pretty sure that's not how memory loss works, but if that's what they told you happened...
He looked down at the tea and then yawned.
Sorry, I'm pretty tired. I must not have slept well last night.
I noticed Gabby looking at me nervously, and I smiled reassuringly, having a feeling everything would be all right. Don't worry about it. I didn't sleep well either. I had this ridiculous, reoccurring dream. Last night, it almost felt like I was actually there.
Sounds familiar.
He said quietly, rubbing the bridge of his nose lightly. He turned to look at me again, starting to look a bit pale. For a moment, I actually had a fear that I may have been about to kill the guy. He wasn't looking so great.
What's yours about? When it happens to me, I'm back home in my favorite place.
I couldn't help but chuckle. He was trying so hard to seem like whatever was happening wasn't impacting him, trying to seem more awake than he was. "You're not looking so good. Are you okay?" I asked with mostly false concern. The part of me that was actually concerned managed to keep me from sounding completely fake. He sighed and went to get to his feet, stumbling slightly.
Yeah, I'm all right. I think I'll go home, though. I probably need to see my specialist back home.
The pause made me concerned that I had actually done something to really harm the guy, but his tone sounded so uncertain with the words that my heart was telling me he would be okay. Follow your gut, the voice in the back of my mind told me, and I quickly got to my feet, catching the travel mugs that fell out of his hand.
No, I'm all right. I just need to go home.
The words were cut off as his eyes flickered shut. Gabby got to her feet with a gasp, gesturing in the air for Slade to drive in. Is he all right? She asked as I slung his arm over my shoulders. We needed to move fast before the staff was on our tail and trying to make sure he was all right. He's fine. We just need to get him out of here. Take his legs, Gabby, I said in a rushed tone as I lifted up his upper body. I could have done it myself. But of all the strange things for people to see, they didn't need to see a relatively regular girl lifting him up on her own. Gabby rushed to his feet, grabbing them. I just needed her there for show. I took the brunt of it myself, walking backwards down the hill and trying not to trip over my own 2 feet. Slade was idling at the base of the hill, waiting for us to come down. His eyes met mine, and he didn't look too pleased with the situation. Running off in a government ship was bad enough. Knocking out a guy and kidnapping him pushed it over the edge a bit. I loaded him quickly, not even bothering to open the door to get him into the vehicle. I didn't even bother opening one myself as Gabby slid into the front seat next to Slade. I just jumped into the back, adjusting Rayner Jace into a more natural position from where he had landed in the seat, even buckling him in just to make it look like he was sleeping to anyone passing by.
Really? You chose that scrawny guy? He looks like one of those kids who smokes behind the school and thinks he's cool.
Slade grumbled as he started up the car and left the front of the school. I looked back to the confused faces of people who we had been in school with for years and couldn't help but wave at them. I hadn't gotten attached to the high school, and I was thrilled to be finally getting out. I turned back to Slade then, retorting with, Slade, you were the guy who smoked behind the school and thought you were cool.
We need someone made of tougher stuff than that,
he said, gesturing towards the boy in the back seat.
We're going to be on the run from the government, Karri. You can't pick them based on looks.
Believe me, if I was basing this on looks, you wouldn't be going with us, I teased in an attempt to change the topic. Gabby spoke up then. Karri, you know that's not true. Don't worry, Slade. You're a very handsome man. If it were based on looks, we'd keep you. It was rare that I actually saw Slade go red, but he did in that moment and couldn't seem to figure out what to say.
Fine, but just keep him out of my hair. And he's sleeping on the couch or in your room. We don't have the space.
I sighed in defeat. That wasn't a battle I was about to fight my brother on right now. He would get over it eventually, and I knew this guy was going to be valuable somehow. He stirred slightly, and I stiffened, looking over and hoping he wasn't about to wake up.
Karri Dumos? They said you would.
It was quiet, barely able to be heard with the roar of the wind in the convertible. I wasn't sure who Dumos was, but I assumed in the state he was in, he had confused me with someone else he knew. Who said I would do what? I asked, and noticed he was fading further. I reached out, grabbing his wrist and feeling his pulse. It was strong, even if his breathing was a bit shallow. I was clearly not a doctor, but I had a feeling he would be fine.
The stars,
was all he said in response before he faded entirely.
What the hell was he talking about?
Slade asked, although he didn't look as concerned about it as I expected from him.
Dumos.
I pushed the dark hair back from his face so I could see it, putting my hand in front of his nose and mouth just to make sure he was still breathing. I don't know. He must have confused me with someone. Maybe someone else named Karri. Slade shook his head as he drove. We were now reaching the edge of town and going onto a dirt road that led to the forest where the Vital was. I still didn't understand why Slade had decided on that name, but he said it meant queen. In his words, in
some weird fucking language. You sure this is abandoned, Gabs?
Slade asked her, looking over at her for a moment.
We could be in some deep shit if you're wrong. What model did you say it was again?
EFH 1206, but I watched it for weeks. No one even so much as drove down this road. Slade, we'll be fine. She put a hand on his shoulder reassuringly, and although the lines next to his eyes gave away the tension he was feeling, I saw him visibly relax at the contact. He took in a deep breath.
That's a military ship.
I noticed his knuckles turning white as they wrapped around the steering wheel tightly.
There were only a few produced, and they weren't used for long. I think they're all out of commission now.
So they're probably not even looking for it, she said happily, putting her arm back down. They looked so natural next to one another, and I couldn't believe they didn't see it like I did. Or they were just in denial. He nodded.
There's always a chance the tracking won't turn on until it's in flight, so we'll have to be cautious.
Gabby didn't look concerned. She had likely thought all of that through already. Do you trust me?
Yeah, I trust you.
It was a whisper as he pulled through into the clearing Gabby directed him to. He took off his sunglasses as he looked at her for the first time. His eyes were wide, and looking at the ship, he almost looked like a kid who had been given free rein in a candy store before he composed himself.
Does she have a place for the car?
We'll have to go in and open up the right storage, then you can drive right in, Gabby told him as she opened the door and stepped out of the car. Slade was still staring at the nearly brand new ship, examining every part of her he could see. He ran a hand through his hair and began chuckling.
I never thought I'd see one of her up close. They just didn't last. She's gorgeous.
The ship was dark, almost as if it was made for stealth. If it hadn't been so large, it might have been. I had no idea how they managed to keep this hidden for so long, and no idea why they wouldn't keep track of it. It seemed dangerous to have something like this where the public could find it, and that was a lesson they were about to learn.
It's bigger than I expected,
he said as he got out of the car himself, and I couldn't help myself. Oh, right. So we definitely have the space for Jace to have his own room, I told him as I unbuckled Rayner out of the seat and lifted him over my shoulder. No one around here was going to be shocked I could lift him, except maybe him, if he were to wake up. Slade turned around, glaring at the guy thrown over my shoulder.
No. You brought in the stray, you get to deal with him. Not our problem.
Seriously? Fine, he'll take the couch. He wasn't going to be happy about that. It wasn't like he had chosen to come with us after all. There was no way I was going to share my bed, though. Not with him. Slade was already looking at the ship up close, examining its landing gear with fascination. He hadn't been near military equipment in years and had really intended to not be near any again. Yet, here he was. He was weak when it came to his girls. There was no doubt about it. Karri, why don't you get him inside while we get the car loaded up? Gabby asked, poking her head out from behind the door. She disappeared for a moment, and there was a loud whirring sound as a storage compartment lowered from under the ship. There was a Jeep inside, one that definitely didn't look as if she had put it there. It looked military grade, and I assumed it was abandoned with the ship. Yet there was enough room for a second vehicle. Gabby came out and looked as surprised as I had been. I hadn't opened storage yet. I just assumed they would have cleared it out. Slade looked thoroughly uncomfortable now, but as I walked into the ship, I saw him getting in the car to drive it in. Gabby was still staring in storage with an excited look on her face. She had gotten more than she bargained for and another project to get working. I made my way through the halls until I found the main living area of the ship and put him down on the couch there. It was older, worn, but had been cleaned by someone. I wondered for a moment if it was our squatter. It had to be him or Gabby. They were the only ones who were around more often than not. I made sure he wasn't lying on limbs in any way that would be too uncomfortable to wake up to. Giving him that small courtesy was the least I could do in this situation. As I stood to move away, I felt a hand wrap around my wrist lightly and looked down to see his hand holding me. His eyes were still closed, and I knew he wasn't awake from how easy it would be to break his grip. Instead of doing that, I sunk down to his level for a moment. Being this close to him felt uncomfortable for some reason, but in other ways it felt comfortable, safe. I couldn't understand why my mind couldn't just grasp onto one feeling about him, why it was conflicted in every way. After a moment of silence, he released my wrist and whispered one word.
Jake.
I jumped to my feet, my heart feeling as if it had been shocked for a brief second before it passed. A quick image passed through my mind of the dream I kept having in the strange meadow, but as quickly as it had come, it was all gone again. After that moment, I couldn't even remember the feeling that had caused it. It was a common enough name. There had been at least 5 Jakes in our school. Yet, coming from him, it almost felt like a dirty secret had been revealed. "Who's Jake?" I asked. But he turned over in his sleep to face the back of the couch, effectively cutting off any answers I might have gotten. Something about the whole moment felt unnerving, and I crossed my arms as I moved to the door, turning back to look at him. He was unmoving, and there were no sounds coming from him except for breathing that was growing stronger again already. I made sure to shut the door tightly behind me, walking away as quickly as I could to the control room. Whatever was happening between him and I that felt so uncomfortable, I didn't want anything to do with it, at least not until he was awake and could answer my questions. When I entered the control room, I could already see Gabby and Slade waiting there. Gabby turned excitedly, clapping her hands together and grinning at me from ear to ear. I couldn't even control the smile that lit up my face. This was the start of something great. Slade still looked concerned, but even he couldn't deny Gabby's contagious joy. He grinned as he looked at all of the controls, running his hand lightly over them, relishing in every moment he spent on the ship already. In the moment, I couldn't even think of the right words to say what I wanted to get across, and Gabby could see that. She nodded at me and turned to the controls, letting Slade know where she needed him. "Let's get this queen closer to the stars. How about it?" she said as the roar of the engines shook the ship, starting up to a powerful beginning.
Damn.